Hi everyone, Aidan here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at and showing you how to install the Thule TracRac SR ladder rack on our 2021 GMC Sierra 2500. Now this is going to be a very capable ladder rack, perfect for a work truck because it's got a heavy weight capacity of 1,250 pounds. Plus with some nice features like included load stops for helping to box in whatever you're carrying, and plenty of tie down points throughout. You're going to be able to tie things down safely and quickly. But one of the things that really sets this apart is the sliding, where you can loosen up hand knobs and actually move the uprights front and back to match a different spread, or just all the way towards the cab for a more stored position, or entirely remove them if you wanted to take it off. And here's what that would look like all up to the cab of your truck. This takes up no more room front to back than something like a toolbox or a retractable tonneau cover might. And the advantage here is now we've got all this vertical room where we can stack stuff up if we've got a taller load, maybe something like a refrigerator, or you're just loading up your bed with a bunch of stuff, you know you don't need the ladder rack, and you want the ability to stand up and move around your bed more freely without risk of bonking your head as you're walking by. And when you're ready to use the ladder rack again, it's as simple as sliding it back out to whatever position you need and tightening it down. The use of hand knobs means that making those adjustments is quick and easy, so you don't have to worry about bringing tools with you, and the stops at the end of each track mean that you don't have to worry about sliding this too far off. And if you wanted to, you could always remove those screws and fully remove the uprights if you needed more full access to your bed. The thing that makes all of this sliding possible is the base rail system. You're going to have separate tracks for both your rear and your front crossbar so they operate independently from one another. And Thule even offers some tie-down points and other accessories that could slide onto these tracks and give you extra function, meaning that these aren't just used for the ladder rack itself. They can be used to expand and add tie-down points and just overall keep your rack a little bit more functional. It's a really simple install process getting these base rails attached to your truck bed rails, and for the most part is utilizing factory holes. The other nice thing is if you've got something like the grab handle included from the factory on your Sierra, you retain that function. There is a bolt behind here, but everything reinstalls just like it was before, and you don't have to sacrifice that feature on your vehicle just to attach the ladder rack. This rack is going to sit 27 5/16 of an inch tall from the bed rail to the top of the crossbar, which on our Sierra gives us plenty of clearance with the cab if we did have an elongated load that's stuck over the cab. Something to consider if you are using this for work and you're hauling really long ladders or lumber, and you're going to frequently have loads extending over the cab, you may consider the version of this that has the cantilever arm, which will be an extra supported arm out over the cab. That's going to be really helpful for the job site application. And if you don't go with that right out of the gate and you just start with this base rack system, you can add the cantilever as an accessory later down the road if you change your mind. The crossbars are 69.5 inches long, which is going to give you plenty of length to work with for loading up lumber, ladders, or just mounting accessories too. Now our neighbor today is using this primarily for work. So stuff up here is going to probably be, for the most part, loaded up with the load stops, strapped down, things like that. But if down the road he ever did decide to mount up something that's more of a sports and rec accessory, like maybe a tent or a kayak carrier, these bars are going to be pretty thick and maybe not so accommodating to clamp around accessories, but the T-track that's in the top of these bars that our load stops are utilizing to move around can also be used for those other accessories. So if you do have a kayak carrier or a bike rack that you wanted to load up here, you could utilize that track to mount it. And because these bars slide back and forth so easily, we can bring them closer together and get a nicer crossbar spread for those types of accessories pretty quickly if we needed to. And throughout every piece on the carrier, you're going to find aluminum construction, and Thule takes it a step further and even puts a powder coat over top of that aluminum. So you're going to get really good rust resistance here, and you're not going to have to worry about leaving this outside. Even some of the components like your end caps for the crossbars and the uprights for the load stops are also going to be metal rather than a plastic construction. So All throughout, you're going to get really premium materials. But with all that in mind, you might be wondering what other options are out there if you're not entirely sold on this option from Thule. Because it exists in this really interesting middle area for me where it's really heavy duty and it can handle the worksite application stuff with a high weight capacity and the ease of being able to move it around and access your bed when you need it. But on the flip side of that ease of moving things back and forth and the TracRac is also going to lend itself pretty well to sports and rec applications. But if you find yourself leaning more one way or the other, maybe you're looking for just a more basic ladder rack just to get the job done for a worksite application. In that instance, Ericsson has a pretty solid option that has a heavier weight capacity with 800 pounds, but it's pretty bare bones. So if you don't need all the premium features and the ease of adjustment, you just need something to load up with stuff, that could be a good option for you. And then on the flip side, if you're looking for something that's more geared towards sports and rec, and maybe lends itself better to clamp around accessories, not just TracRac accessories, I'd recommend the Yakima Overhaul. That ladder rack has some nice features like height adjustment, although it's not going to be as easy to move front and back. So you'll probably set that a little closer together for your sports and rec accessories and just leave it there and be able to swap things in and out as needed. If you ever needed to have it raised up and have cab clearance for an elongated load, you could, but you're not going to get as heavy a weight capacity there, so it's not the best option for a job site application. Whichever one you go with, though, you can find all those options here at eTrailer. But with all that in mind, you're probably wondering, how does it install? It is going to be a little bit more involved in some places just because you want to make sure these rails are running parallel to one another. It's not hard, but it's going to be time consuming to make sure you get it right. But once you do get it right, the rest of the install goes very quickly and it's going to be really straightforward. So we'll walk you through that process right now. Now you want to start off your installation in the truck bed towards the cab of the truck. And on your bed rails, you're probably going to have these rectangle cutouts where your stake pockets would be. But the way these are set up, it's all one solid piece. So we need to actually just cut this out. You can choose whatever you like to get this done, a Dremel. We're going to be using a multi-tool. And we're just going to go along the straight edges and use a razor knife to get the corners so it's a nice clean cut. And this plastic is going to be soft enough so a razor knife will do just fine pushing through those corners there. And really all this is going to get covered up, so if you don't want to take the time to grab a second tool, you really don't have to. Like I said, this will all get covered up. I'm just going to clean away any of those plastic burrs that remain and do that on both sides. Now, one other piece of prep work you might need to do, depending on the options your Sierra has, is removing this grab handle here to help you get up and into the tailgate or into the bed. But if you have it, there's going to be 3 points of contact, 2 nuts here, and then around the corner there's going to be a bolt. You can get those removed with a 1/2-inch socket, and that'll give us access to a mounting hole. So as we get that last nut removed, there will be a backing plate for these 2 studs here that can pop off from inside that stake pocket. And then this whole thing should remove. It's got a bit of adhesive, but just pop that off. Set all of this to the side because we do want to reuse it later. But right here, this is what we're looking for, this rubber plug. That's just going to pop out and give us access to this mounting hole. Moving on to the base rails here, you're going to have 2 separate holes on either end. One right here is going to be quite a bit more offset, and the one on the other side will be closer to centered. Now, upon looking at your bed rail, it might seem like this offset hole is going to go to the stake pocket near the cab of your truck, but that's actually backwards. This offset one will be for the tailgate end because your bed tapers in, and this is going to account for that taper to ensure that those rails are running parallel. The hardware is going to be a little bit different for the front and back. So for that offset hole, we're getting a long bolt with plastic washer that'll go down through. And on the underside, we're going to have this clamp here. So it's going to be threaded at the top and have a hole on the side that's also threaded. Just get that started on the vertical threads. And you'll notice that we do have some anti-seize on there, just because it is stainless hardware, and that's going to help make sure nothing seizes up or mars the threads for us. Just make our job easier, especially as we're making adjustments with this up or down. That'll go into the rear stake pocket by the tailgate. The cab side of the truck is going to be the same bolt and washer combination, only this time you're going to have a large rubber block that goes over that bolt and a metal plate that'll follow that up. Now I'm using the included tool to spin that bolt from the top here because it's just going to be a little bit easier. We want this washer, this block, to make contact with that rubber square and just compress down a little bit. The idea is once this is down in the stake pocket, we're not going to have any access to it. So we don't want this free spinning when we try to tighten it from the top. As we tighten it though, that rubber block will get crushed and expand, locking this into that stake pocket by our cab. So now we'll just drop this into place. I'm going to drop my front stake pocket in first and make sure that the threads on this block are pointing in towards the bed as I drop it in, and lay it down flat. But from here you'll have a good amount of side to side, front to back movement. That's okay. We want everything pretty loose right now while we get our spacing adjusted. Now, one thing you don't want to forget is that backing plate for your grab handle if you had to remove that earlier. Before things get tightened down on the driver's side, just make sure that's in there because it's going to get covered up. So we've got the front side pretty well tightened down, and we're able to still access this hole here. I'll do my best to keep my hand out of the way of showing you guys what's going on. But I've got it actually twisted around, so. Now in hindsight, rather than fully removing this, when you take the handle off, just keep it in place with a nut like that so that you can go through with the full installation of your base rail here and just not have to worry about potentially forgetting that down the road. Before we tighten anything down, I want to make sure these rails are running parallel to one another. And the way we're going to do that is just running a tape measure across the truck bed, hooking on to that first track, and measuring to this one here at the same point. And I'm just going to measure at the front and back right by my mounting points. And while it might look like it's crooked on the bed rail, that's okay. Like we mentioned, the truck bed is tapered, so it's not going to look the same as the bed rail, but it will be running parallel. You want those measurements to be matching up exactly, plus or minus 1/16 of an inch. So you can have, again, a little bit of wiggle room there, but try to get this one as close as you can because the closer you get it, the smoother those uprights are going to run along these tracks if they're perfectly parallel. When we're happy with the spacing, tightening things down, we'll use that included Allen key and a 5/16 socket over the top to run that down. And as you're doing this, just put some downward pressure on here to make sure that rubber block stays seated in the stake pocket. Now, as I'm tightening this down, because we're compressing that rubber block, it's not going to feel super different throughout. So once I've gone a little bit, I'm just going to pull on it. And if nothing shifts upward, I know that rubber block has expanded enough to hold this captive. I'll come back to this later and this time put a torque wrench on it to tighten things down to the specs and the instructions. But first we need to tighten the tailgate end. For the tailgate side, we'll tighten that inside bolt first. And we're just going to snug that up for now. And then same thing where we just tighten up that top bolt, putting some downward pressure on that rail. And we're not going super tight with this. I just want it to have a little bit of resistance, and repeat that process on the other side. Once you've snugged things down, go back through and take all the same measurements you just did. Checking those side-to-side measurements to make sure things didn't shift around on us, and also getting your flat edge and ensuring that everything's still level. That's the one you're probably gonna have to go back through and change some things on, because as we tighten this down to the bed rail, it's gonna change how it's sitting a little bit, and in our case it did. So I'm gonna loosen things up, add some more spacers to bring those back into level, tighten them back down, check again, and once we're happy with everything in the snug position, we'll go back through and torque it. With everything tightened down and all the measurements where you want them to be, now you can finally torque things down. Those specific torque specs can be found in your instructions, and as you're going through this, if you're thinking to yourself, you don't have a torque wrench, that's okay. You can find one here at etrailer if you need it, or you can typically check one out or rent one from local auto parts stores. Now with everything torqued down, if you remove the grab handle, now it's time to put it back on. The one thing I just will advise you of is be careful, because the stake pocket's completely blocked now, and if we push this backing plate into the stake pocket, you're gonna have to loosen up everything to get it back out. So just be careful with it as best you can. Apply a fair amount of pressure to it on the side while you get that lined up. And just try to keep it from falling back in. Once all the hardware is loosely in, tighten it back down. The last thing we'll do to the base rails is come back through and cover up the mounting holes with these plastic plugs and thread these small screws into the front of the tracks by the cab of our truck. Don't worry about the tailgate end because we need to leave that open for now. When we slide our uprights in, these will act like stoppers so it doesn't hit our cab. And the very last thing we'll do is put these in the tailgate end. Turning our attention now to the uprights and the assemblies, we're going to install these short bolts with these square nuts into all the top holes on the uprights so that they look like this. And when lining up your crossbars and your uprights together, you'll notice that there's a series of divots. So you can see right here, there's 2 lips on either side. If I flip the crossbar over, you'll see, again, 2 lips. That's how we know we've got the correct side here. I'm just gonna slide those square nuts into the bottom channel. Everything's just hand tight now so that we can get it lined up properly and do that on both sides. The finished result should be your crossbar with both uprights able to stand on its own, and we're just gonna follow it up with one of these end caps and a screw going from underneath to hold that end cap in place and make sure that nothing comes loose. Now with that fully tightened in on both sides, we know these uprights aren't gonna slide out. We can take this to our base rails. So grab an extra set of hands here to help you lift, but everything's gonna be completely loose, and you can lift the uprights up to the track, line it up with the outer channel, and just slide it onto the base rails. About the same speed as the person on the other side so that you don't kind of feed it on crooked and let it bind itself up. And if you need to, you can always adjust the uprights. And we just want to slide this all the way towards the cab of the truck with both of these feet here pointing towards the tailgate end. Once you've got it on the track, you can lift by the bottom of the uprights here and slide it pretty easily. Because things aren't tightened up, you might find that it binds every now and again, but this is why we tried so hard earlier to make sure everything was parallel so that it can slide smoothly like this. With everything pushed to the front where we want this sitting, we can now adjust our side-to-side crossbar spread, just measuring the overhang on both sides to ensure that it's even. And when you're happy with it, you can come back through with a 7/32 Allen key and tighten up those screws with the square nuts that we left loose from earlier. That'll bind the crossbar to the uprights. We can add in these supports next. Up top, you'll notice the same combination of hardware with a short screw and a square nut. And on the bottom side, there's gonna be this indent. That'll line up with a threaded hole on the upright. Get that square nut lined up with the track underneath. Push it over till that threaded hole lines up, and grab one of the longer bolts in your kit. Thread that in, and we'll tighten down both of those. And that'll get repeated on the other side like all the other remaining steps over here. These tie downs will just thread into some pre-existing holes on the outside of your upright. Up top, we can slide these T-bolts into that top access hole, follow that up with our load stop, and add one of these hand knobs to that thread that's poking up through. And now, that's our load stop. We can tighten it up wherever we want it, loosen it, move it along, and just repeat that for the other side. And the last thing we need to do is install these threaded hand knobs to the bases. And basically, just whenever we tighten this down fully, it'll prevent the upright assembly from sliding back and forth. Loosen it up, and we'll be able to slide it. So, with that done, we can repeat all the same steps from the uprights, the crossbars, for the rear assembly. And here's what that finished product is going to look like. Like I mentioned, the process for this upright assembly is the exact same. The only thing you need to keep in mind is once it's on there, just add in your final 2 set screws so you've got stoppers at the front and the rear of these tracks so that nothing comes off of those tracks. But you can give it a good shake test to make sure that nothing's left loose, all the pieces are in place, and that'll do it for your installation and our look at the Thule TracRac SR on our 2021 GMC Sierra 2500. Thanks for watching.